97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco is here today. It's brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com, and we'll win real money with their sports book, along with casino games from the comfort of your home. You must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's get Andrew's take on this game, some XFactors, some things to watch, some matchups here as the Eagles have their hands full with Aaron Donald, that we know. But what else about this team should we take a look at? Let's bring Andrew DiCecco from 97.3 ESPN.com and the InsideTheBirds.com podcast with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And Andrew, you look at this Rams team, it's Aaron Donald. If I was to say, what is the identity of the Rams, what's your answer?
Their identity is their aerial attack right now. Todd Gurley's no longer there. They have a young backfield with Malcolm Brown, Cam Akers, and Darrell Henderson, but they do have the nucleus of receivers in Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and they have Josh Reynolds and a young Van Jefferson, who I do anticipate them utilizing frequently on Sunday.
So this is a team, by the way, you mentioned the passing game, and I think everybody has remembered them as this passing team. They ran the ball 40 times last week. Jim Schwartz stressed on Tuesday, hey, they're committed to the run. So is there some thought that maybe they are changing their identity?
I think so. When you look at they brought in a new offensive coordinator in Kevin O'Connell. It's really the first offensive coordinator that the Rams have had since 2017 when, of course, they had Matt LaFleur. So he's bringing in some new ideas and concepts. Obviously, Sean McVay's still calling the plays. And there's going to be, the same subtleties that they've always had. You're going to see a heavy usage of 11 personnel, some pre-snap motion, and lots of play-action passes. I think that was they're kind of getting their footing in the first week. The running game was working. They wanted to go to it. They didn't have a receiver that really did any damage outside of Robert Woods, who had 8 targets and over 100 yards receiving. And he's really the engine of the passing game. Cooper Kupp gets a lot of the recognition, but make no mistake, Robert Woods is the engine that makes that offense go.
Rams did try and commit to the run super heavy. Do you think that can actually benefit the Eagles?
I do, but the more I think of it is, the Eagles may not be fully equipped to even stop the run. Let's not forget that Vinny Curry, one of the best run-defending linemen that the Eagles have, is out for the foreseeable future with injury. Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham both listed as questionable. You're going to have to rely on guys like Casey Toohill, Josh Sweat for increased snaps. Casey Toohill in his first NFL game. You might have to promote Joe Ostman from the practice squad tomorrow. We'll find out. There's going to be a lot of – and Jannard Avery's not really equipped to handle the running game. He's very undersized, about 250 pounds. He's more of a speed edge rusher rather than a primary run-defending defensive end. So, I mean, but the encouraging news that we just heard is that Javon Hargrave was a full participant today. So all signs point to him playing, which they really need. Obviously, Malik Jackson had played really well last week. He gives them that flexibility to play inside and outside, but also having Javon Hargrave there. You have Hassan Ridgeway. They're going to have some guys there, but they're going to be really light on the edge.
Yeah, I just saw this, that Hargrave was a full participant. Number one, how much of a surprise is that? And number two, I mean, Malik Jackson played really well. Obviously, Fletcher Cox is not coming out of the lineup all that much. But so what does getting Hargrave back bring to this defense? They played well last week. They gave up 27, so you might think, they didn't play that well. They gave up 27, but for yardage-wise, they didn't give up all that much because they kept getting short field. So what does the return of Hargrave mean to this defense?
It means a lot to the defense. I mean, I do anticipate him starting, but I don't know that he's ready to full-on take on, a full slate of snaps. I think we'll have to be in a rotation with Malik Jackson. Remember, Hargrave hasn't played in nearly a month, but probably about a month now, with that pec injury and hamstring injury. So it is kind of miraculous to see him ready to go for this Sunday, and they really need him when you look at there, and there's a lot of opportunity here. When you look at particularly the left side of the Rams offensive line with 38-year-old Andrew Whitworth at left tackle. You have Austin Blythe at center, who can play both guard positions, and he plays center, but he's a little bit undersized and not as athletic. And Austin Corbett, the right guard. There's going to be some opportunity there to really get some interior rush going and really disrupt the backfield and the running game. And they really need all bodies there to be able to do that. So that's definitely encouraging.
If need be, due to injuries like Brandon Graham and the concussion and Derek Barnett, although it does seem like he's on the right path. But if anything does happen, do you see a scenario where maybe Malik Jackson plays the outside?
Yeah, and I really do think that he would have to in that scenario because then all of a sudden you're looking at guys like Casey Tuhill, who's never taken an NFL snap. I mean, it would just be his second NFL game. He wasn't active last week. But it's not fair to ask somebody like that to play 20 snaps and play at a high level. And then you also have probably Joe Osman, who's going to have to be playing in his first NFL game. There's just going to be a sheer lack of bodies there. And I think that you really need to add a veteran guy because, we've mentioned it on the InsideTheBirds.com articles, and also they mentioned it on the podcast. Josh Sweat's not really equipped to play over 50 snaps. He played a career-high 49 snaps last week. But he has a history of the knee injuries dating back to high school, not really equipped to be able to play a lot of snaps like that over a long period of time. He obviously is very productive when he's been out there, but in order to sustain his effectiveness, I think that they really need to get a rotation going and get some guys healthy.
Andrew DiCecco is with us here for Football at 4, Eagles and Rams. That's some good news with, obviously, Hargrave, Derek Barnett, as we mentioned, full participant as well, as Andrew mentioned, Brandon Graham, full participant as well. So it looks like the Eagles, there was a lot of questions earlier in the week when we had you on, Andrew, about who's going to play defensive end. It looks like Barnett and Graham and Hargrave answer some of our questions there. Let's look at some of the other key injury stuff here, and that would be the obvious return of Lane Johnson. Now, today, Doug Pederson said Nate Herbig will start at right guard. So how about that matchup for Herbig? Do you anticipate the Rams giving him a lot of Aaron Donald?
Yeah, I sure do. And the first thing I thought of, I anticipate a lot of stunting with Aaron Donald, pressuring that side. They're going to test Lane Johnson and his ankle. He's not going to be 100%, but like we talked about, Lane Johnson at 85 or 90%, you'll certainly take that. That's better than most right tackles in football. But they're definitely going to take advantage of that. They're going to take advantage of Nate Herbig. Jason Kelsey's role in this game becomes even more important than it has in recent year and over the past year, because now he has to kind of control that because they have Michael Brockers and they have, of course, Aaron Donald, two guys that like to get a lot of penetration. So he's going to also have to aid Nate Herbig, who's going to have his hands full with Michael Brockers and those guys. So he's going to have a lot on his plate. Jason Kelsey is, and then, Nate Herbig's he's going to definitely be in for a long afternoon in a second NFL start.
Do you think Brown, who they just acquired off Chicago's practice squad, has a legit chance in the near future of maybe taking that spot away from Herbig?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's not forget that he's played in 60 NFL games. Jamon Brown did, and including 41 starts. Once he gets the blocking schemes down and the concepts that the Eagles are implementing, I think that you'll see him become that starter. And you really need a veteran in there. You have a veteran offensive line, and the guy who has so much experience like he does, I think it's only a matter of time before he unseats Nate Herbig.
I'm interested to get your take now on, last week, you look at the Eagles secondary, and last week I thought they did a pretty good job. Slay, I thought pretty much lived up to the hype. Maddox, I thought, played pretty well. And Nikel Roby-Coleman, who's facing his former team. So I'm interested to get your take on that matchup in the secondary. You mentioned Woods. Cooper Kupp is a bigger slot guy. So how do the Eagles' defensive backs match up with this, which a lot of people think of the Rams. They think of this high-flying offense. But I think the Eagles' secondary matches up pretty well with them. Do you?
I do. And last week, they really showed up, and they impressed me in certain areas. Avonte Maddox, in particular, on veteran Dontrell Inman, who was about 6'3". He goes about 6'3". I thought Maddox did a nice job there. Obviously, Darius Slay was as advertised last week. Only surrendered 2 catches for 26 yards to Terry McLaurin. That was impressive. Actually, the guy who I thought was going to have the best game out of all of them was Nikel Roby-Coleman, and he surrendered, I believe it was 5 catches or so to Steven Sims Jr. but not for many yards. Not for many yards. I thought he held up decently, but he's going to have a particular challenge this week going against the 6'3" Josh Reynolds and Van Jefferson, who I felt going into the draft that he was the most accomplished route runner in the entire draft. Obviously, Sean Jefferson's son, and he has a lot of upside as a vertical slot. He's going to be a factor in this game. I do think Vontae Maddox is going to take on Cooper Kupp on the outside, and I think Slay is going to handle Robert Woods. And Robert Woods isn't going to wow everybody with this tremendous speed, but he has fantastic body control. He's a terrific route runner. He's a route salesman, and he's very savvy. And in my opinion, Robert Woods is one of the most underrated wide receivers in football. So I think that, obviously last week he was the guy that they were going to. He had 8 targets. So I think that Slay's going to trail him.
Last week, the Rams ran it 40 times. We've talked about that. What you think of the Eagle linebackers last week and how they match up with the run game here? Because one concern I would have is if the Rams stick committed to the run and run it 40 times. Like, the Eagles might do a good job at stopping the run, but could it wear them down as that game goes on with those smaller linebackers? What did you think of the linebackers last week? Because I know that's an area you wanted to keep your eye on.
Yeah, I thought the linebackers were fine. They didn't really do anything to stand out. They were rather uninspiring. Obviously they kind of struggled with Logan Thomas over the middle there. They're going to struggle this week in the running game, especially if you're missing, Brandon Graham or Derek Barnett or possibly both, because then all of a sudden, you might get some penetration there with Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave, but over time, they're going to get to that second level and they're going to wear on those guys. And that's where having those smaller linebackers that move very well laterally, and play well in coverage, they're not going to hold up very well against the run. That's where a guy like TJ Edwards really would come into play there.
How do you feel about the coaching matchup? I know it's hard to say this now after last week, but look, Doug Pederson and Jim Schwartz, they have a good record against Sean McVay and this team.
Yeah, Doug Pederson has Sean McVay's number. There's no doubt about it. Sean McVay came out like gangbusters. That's all, like in his first couple of seasons there at the Rams. He was known as being this fantastic innovator, this brilliant offensive mind. And for a while there, he was. But over the past year or so, it's felt like the league really caught up to him. There were certain things that weren't really going as anticipated. When you look at last season, on first down, when the Rams would run on 1st and 10 in the first half, in 2018 they averaged 6 yards per carry. Last season they were at 3.5 yards per carry. They couldn't get anything going. Their offensive line was ravaged by injuries. They couldn't hit on a lot of these deep balls, and they just kept going back to the well. Much like what you saw last week with the Eagles, there was a lot of different things there that McVay wasn't altering his style, and he proved to be a little bit stubborn in his concepts and approach. And I think that's what kind of was ultimately their detriment last season.
Speaking of the coaches, there was a interesting report last night that suggested that Doug Pederson was at the end of the line. I don't know what that means. Was he like out of patience, or they're coming to the end of the line from him? But what do you make of the fact that is there problems with the organization and Doug? Are they not seeing eye to eye on things? Well, what is your take on that?
Yeah, Jeff sent me a text last night, and we both agree that was one of the weirdest reports that we've seen. Just the wording and just the whole point of that.
I listened to the verbal part of it. I mean, they were talking kind of back and forth in a podcast, and they just ran. Oh, he's at the end of the line, and it was at the end of the line. It was no reference as to what.
Yeah, and that to me sounds more like an opinion. You could really make a case that every coach is at the end of the line. You can't really base things off of one game. I think that's like in Philadelphia, when they lose one game, fans are of the belief that they lost. You would have thought they lost 7 games. I think everything's kind of blown out of proportion after one game, and this kind of stuff, this kind of chatter gets kind of died down when they get back on track this week and hopefully pick up a victory.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think anybody thought that Doug did a great job in the first game. I don't know. He's been a little testy, but he's been testy in the past after they lost games, right? I mean,
he has been a little terse this week. Yeah, I've noticed that. Very short.
Yeah, well, and he's been like in the past when they've lost and they've had some stretches. Look, the last 2 years they have not got off to great starts, and he was frustrated, and then they played well in the second half of the season. But I want to ask you about the importance of this game because, yeah, you have Cincinnati next week. week, and they're just what they are. But you got a stretch of San Fran, Baltimore, Pittsburgh coming up. What does that do to the importance of this? I hate to say week 2. I'm certainly not that guy that says it's must win, but, man, that's a very daunting schedule you have coming up after next week.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm one of those guys that I hate to call any game a must-win. But when you look at the slate of games that are to follow, it doesn't get any easier. You cannot afford to go 0-2 if you're the Eagles. When you look at like you said, they pretty much have a murderer's row of teams that are coming after the Bengals. So you had to have last week. You really did, and they couldn't afford to let that slip away. But that's in the past now. They have to move forward, and I do think that they're going to come away with a victory this week. But yet, I mean, they to go 0-2 and really face those games. That's going to be a challenge to kind of rebound and get out of that hole.
Now, we heard Carson Wentz say Aaron Donald's a monster. He's a game wrecker. So what do the Eagles do to kind of get away? I mean, they've handled him well in the past, Andrew. He's played 3 games. In 3 games against Philly, he has 5 tackles and no sacks. So whatever they've done, they have figured out a way to kind of neutralize him.
Yeah, I mean, he's been their game wrecker, and then I should say he's been their primary game wrecker. And I think their approach going into the game, obviously, it's every team's approach, is don't let that guy beat you. Let somebody else. If someone's going to get through on the defensive line, let that be all right. But don't let the number 99 be the reason why our offense, our execution's off. And I think that Jeff Stoughton's blocking scheme, and he's schemed it up perfectly, and he really has been a non-factor. Aaron Donald has in those games. So. But now it's a different ball game, Mike, because you have a guy like Nate Herbig, and like they haven't gone into their matchups with such with an inexperienced line. I mean, obviously they're getting a lot of their veteran players back, but Nate Herbig's he's right in the middle of that line. So the communication and the familiarity playing next to Lane Johnson could be a factor on Sunday.
Speaking of game-changing players, Miles Sanders looks to be back, and I just wonder, we saw what happened with Deshaun Jackson, and is this another scenario where maybe this coaching staff goes with the philosophy of let's make sure we ease him in so nothing significant happens?
Yeah, exactly. And Miles Sanders is one of the most important players on offense, Hunter, and they're gonna. I would anticipate them being a little bit ginger and tentative in rushing him back, not to ensure that they don't rush him back, and gradually implement him into the offense, save him for crucial plays. Maybe instead of him getting 16, 18 touches, maybe he gets 11 or 12, and you kind of lean on Boston Scott. Boston Scott, by the way, I was not very impressed with him last week, but maybe you lean on somebody like him and really go back to the short passing game that you didn't do last week. And you saw there was opportunities there. Maybe you utilize a Boston Scott or a Corey Clement to kind of use that as an extension of the running game.
Andrew, last week you mentioned a couple X factors. We'll get a couple from you this week. Greg Ward was one of them. Goddard had a really good game. How do those guys factor in against this Rams defense?
Well, I think Greg Ward is a player that he's not going to burn you. He's not going to be a downfield burner. He has that lateral quickness, but he always has a knack for finding the soft spot in the zone. And you got to see that last week when Carson Wentz was on the move. Greg Ward found an opening and caught the football. He's very secure hands. There's a connection there with him and Carson. I think he's going to be fine in almost every matchup because he's a quarterback friendly player. So the X factor for the Eagles, I would say it's Dallas Goedert. I'm not really impressed with their linebackers of the Rams. If you look at what they have there, Samson Ebukam he's a more athletic edge rusher, but in the middle there they have Micah Kaiser and Troy Reeder. Those are 2 guys that are more proficient against the run rather than being adept in pass coverage. So I think there'll be opportunities there to attack the Rams in the intermediate routes and through the seam there with Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. And then I would say the Rams X factor is going to be Robert Woods. Robert Woods, like I was saying, he's the engine that makes things go. When he got going early last week, it opened up the running game and all these different things, all these different options for the Rams. And Cooper Kupp wasn't even really a factor last week. So if you get Robert Woods going, it seems to open up the floodgates on offense and just kind of create all these different options that they have there. So. Robert Woods and Tyler Higbee, the tight end, and Gerald Everett as well. So
Yeah, Higbee's a guy that, they use a lot in that offense as well. Andrew DiCecco will get his pick for the game coming up in just a second here on the Sports Bash. Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN, the Eagles and the Rams this Sunday. You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. And if there is a spot that you would consider a weak spot for the Rams that the Eagles can go after, what's that?
I think the Eagles can go after I think they can go after the middle, their second level of their defense. The linebackers, like I said, they don't move particularly well. I think you can get the running backs in space, you can get the tight ends in space. That's what's really going to open things up. You're going to look at Jalen Ramsey, who's probably going to be shadowing Deshaun Jackson. I think Jalen Reagor has an opportunity here, one-on-one coverage with Troy Hill, who doesn't run particularly well. I believe he's about a 4.5 or 4.6 speed guy, scrappy player, very smart player, physical. But I think Jalen Reagor can get one over the top on him. I don't think there's anybody that the Rams have outside of Ramsey that can take Jalen Reagor one-on-one. They do have a fantastic free safety in John Johnson III, who I think that if he provides coverage over the top, it's going to be challenging. But one-on-one coverage, I think Jalen Reagor is going to be able to take advantage of single coverage.
All right, and obviously you can hear the game here. We'll get your take and pick on the game in just 1 second. Don't forget, we'll have Lindsey Theory, who covers the Rams, for more on these matchups coming up in about 8 minutes from now. But, Andrew, give us your pick. Who wins and why?
I like the Eagles to win this game 27-24. I think that they're not going to they're not going to make the same mistakes that cost them last week. I think Carson Wentz is going to be, they were probably on Carson Wentz this week on some of his mechanics and fundamentals, and Carson wants to make sure that he's not the top of conversation for a bad reason. And Doug, I think Doug, you could hear him all week in the press conference. He definitely was a little bit shorter, and I think he wants to prove that, he's been questioned all week, and he made comments about, the writers writing something so eloquently about, his play calling and this, that, and the other thing. So I think he's going to come out on fire, and there's opportunity there, and I think they're going to strike early, and they're not going to make the same mistakes.
All right, Andrew Lexham, 27-24. Sal Powell earlier, 20-17. We'll have our picks later on in the show. And, of course, Andrew DiCecco, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, like all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Andrew, enjoy the game.
You too, guys. Take care.